Presenting the Science and Partnerships for Agriculture Conference 2024, lead paper presenter, Professor Linus Opara, a distinguished agricultural engineer and professor, as well as the DSINI South African Research Chair's Initiative Chair in Post Office Technology at Stellenbosch University. He leads a globally recognized team focused on innovative post office practices, especially for pomegranate fruit, and serves on key international committees for agriculture development. He was honored with the 2015-2016 Impressor Award, the 2015 AU Kwame Nkrumah Continental Scientific Award, and most recently, the 2020 for Africa Research Excellence Award for his contribution in developing and validation of a novel integrated value chain approach to research, innovation and capacity building. Ladies and gentlemen, join us welcome Professor Linus Opara, the Director for the UNESCO International Centre for Biotechnology.
Thank you, colleagues. If we can get the slides, then we get started, please. Thank you. If you permit me, I would like to stand on existing protocols, especially the one established by the Executive Director, Farah. He was very, very thorough, and I don't want to miss anything, so I stand on that. Thank you so much. So, colleagues, friends, thank you for the opportunity to share some thoughts with you this morning. We are all in the same space about African agriculture, and everyone here is very passionate about it, I believe so. And we want something to change. We want the needle to move. And there are so many indicators. We have listened to keynote speeches, welcome speeches that talk about aspects of this African agriculture and food system. What I want to do in the few minutes that I'm giving now is to share my own perspectives. And I'm going to take the lens of an academician, right? I'm going to take the lens of a researcher. I'll be very, very interested in data. I'll be interested in measurements. I'll be interested in holding people accountable in their own little space. And I'm also interested in learning from each other, especially best practices in what we do. So, less than 12 months ago, last year, we got this report on the left-hand side of the screen from AGRA about the state of agriculture and food systems in Africa. And I just take 2 bullet points there. First of all, despite all the efforts over the years, we still have a huge problem with poverty and food insecurity on the African continent. That one is there, but a lot is being done. And this was followed by the Africa Food Systems Summit Forum that was also held last year. Some decisions were made, some commitments were made. I want us to pay attention to those commitments so that the next few years ahead, we have some indices to measure our progress. Within the outcomes of that summit that was held last year, I just picked out a few that are related to climate-resilient food systems transformation. I want you to pay attention to the first bullet point there, number A and B. He said that solutions already exist in some of these challenges that we have, but we need to scale them up. Some solutions already exist. We need to find a way to scale them out, to make them useful to larger number of people, to farmers, to business people. The second one talks about doubling our efforts to boost agricultural productivity. And one measure of agricultural productivity is yield, for example. We know that crop yields in Africa, including animals, are probably the lowest compared with the rest of the world. So how do we double productivity of African agriculture when we have the challenge of climate change, we have biodiversity extinction, we have problem with deforestation, and so on and so forth. But people still need to make profit. These are the challenges as we're going to share as we move forward. The last 3 points there, I want to talk about harnessing Africa's potential. It talks about that we do have the resources. We have potential to do things. So what is holding us? We need some action. Instead of talking potentials, we should talk more about actions. So the presidents of African countries that also met during this summit, look at 7 commitments they made. As a researcher, I was very, very excited when I saw this. Many of you know that I work in the post-survey space after production. And look at numbers 4, boom, reducing post-service losses. So what can I do as a researcher, as an academician? How can I work with the private sector? How can I work with the politicians, the policy makers? How can I work with investors to help to address some of these issues here? These are the kind of things we should be asking. We have to domesticate these commitments to our own respective spaces where we're working. Otherwise, if we don't do that, all we'll be doing is blame game and thinking that someone else could have done it. That is why I'm showing those commitments by our heads of state. So, commitments, affirmations, declarations, aspirations, and so on and so forth, but a lot of problems still remain. And there's something special about agriculture, which we practice, is that a lot of these problems are affected by agriculture. A lot of these problems also affect agriculture. So we have to think about it. So it's a balancing game. That is why we talk about sustainability, sustainable food systems. Those of us who studied engineering and agriculture, we know that excessive tilling of the soil and mechanization can cause all sorts of problems, affect the soil microbiome, cause soil compaction, that some of the gains that you got in the first 2 or 3 years, you can lose them forever because you did not do it sustainably. So we know that. So we have to start thinking about how agriculture affects those support structures that enable it to produce and how those external factors also affect agriculture. That is what we have to do. It is not just one or the other. This is very, very important. But in addition to that, we have other problems that confront us beyond agriculture. Poverty, youth unemployment. It is not just about agriculture alone. But the thing that agriculture connects all of them is that everybody must eat, isn't it? We just had coffee and tea now. Everybody must eat. So agriculture has become a connector to the general economy. It doesn't matter whether you're in IT or in policy or in transportation, somehow along the way you must eat something. So everybody should be interested in agriculture. There are other factors also that can change the way we manage and practice agriculture. Think about pandemics. Look at what happened during COVID-19. Some people were not even able to cultivate. In some places where cultivation happened, people were not able to harvest. In some places where crops were harvested, they could not even transport them. How do you assure food security under pandemics? We have to prepare for it. We have an example. It just happened recently. We cannot say wish it away. So the agricultural system we want to talk about in the future, the agriculture we want in Africa must also take into consideration the issue of resilience, shocks that can come. Some of them are natural, many of them are man-made or human-made. We need to think about this and then ask the question, what next? What will nature throw on us, or what are we going to throw on nature by ourselves? We have not been sitting idle on the continent. At least look at where we are now, convened by FARA. We have not been idle. A lot of things have happened. Progress has been made. Significant improvements in productivity have happened over the years. Yields have improved in some crops, in some farming systems. New food systems have emerged. New value chains have emerged. We know that. Some commodities are now being traded within Africa and across Africa. We know that. The problem we have is that the problem is too big. The problem is too big. And the progress is very slow. It is not meeting up with the level of challenges that is facing us. Think about population. So slowness of the progress is a problem. Scale up of the issues. Even where we have made progress, they are so isolated. Departments, institutions, particular organizations, or one particular businesswoman or man. We need to find ways of actually scaling up. Issue of dependence of money from someone else. You know, we just want someone else to come and shave our hair when we go to sleep. Donor fatigue, both internal and external. It is there. Those of us who watch in the research space, we know some people who don't want to entertain our proposals anymore. Those are issues. What about the private sector in African agribusiness? What is wrong? What is going on here? Well, a lot of rich people in agribusiness. Many of us who have done research in other climates, or other environments, we get funding from the private sector to drive research and innovation. To what extent is the private sector involved in all this? Because policy alone is not enough. Training alone is not enough. Having the technology available is not enough. It's a combination of all the various role players. So we need to start thinking about how do we energize the private sector? How do we energize it as a research and university system? These are issues. So there's a lot of leadership on the continent. As I said earlier, progress has been made. African Union has led. You can see CADAP provide framework for what we are doing. And a lot of things have come out of it. STISA, and so on and so forth. On the right-hand side, huge progress. NEPAD has transformed into AUDA NEPAD, right? Look at FARA there, very prominent, significant. African Development Bank, AGRA, RUFORUM, FANAPAN. These are all African, what I may call domestic institutions that are helping to drive this transformation. So we are doing a lot. We also have our friends around the world. The IITs, we listen to the DG speak, IFAD, FAO, World Bank, and so on and so forth. So how come some of the needles who want to shift are still not shifting? We have to think something about the way the whole thing is structured. So now we come to the issue of the transitioning into sustainable food systems. So what does it mean for a researcher, for an academician, for a policy person, for a business person? We have a lot of people here, farmers present here. When we talk about transitioning into sustainable agriculture food system, what does it mean? I think we have to come to common agreement. And these are colleagues who have articulated it very nicely. Where all people have access to healthy diets. We're not just talking about food being available, healthy as well. We're talking about sustainable production systems. We're now talking about resilience, the ability of the food system to heal itself so that the future generations can also practice agriculture and eat. These are the elements of sustainable agricultural food system transformation. But look at the last one that I underlined. I like it so much. Equitable livelihoods. Equitable livelihoods. It's not just about eating food on the table. There are people who have food on their table, young men and women on the African continent. They still try to swim across the sea to Europe and die, where there is food on the table in their mom and dad's kitchen. So we need to think about livelihoods. What type of agriculture will allow us to do that? A couple of colleagues, formed a think tank and tried to develop some indicators. So this is important for us moving forward. In the next 5 years or 10 years we move. When we meet, we should begin to ask ourselves, what are the parameters of our success? What are the indicators of the success of the actions that we have taken? They must translate into what these colleagues have called the themes, the 5 themes. And this is something I want us to pay attention to. Diets and nutrition. We're not just longer talking about crop yield now. If your agricultural and food system is resilient, is transformed, is sustainable, you should be able to contribute to the diets and nutrition of people for healthy life. The environment, natural resources, and the production system. And on the right-hand side, you can also see specific things that we can measure in the food system, along the value chains and environment, that can indicate to us where we stand in the transformation of our food system. So researchers, young men and women here, start paying attention to this, whether you're in agroeconomics or engineering or crop science, start thinking about which role can you play for us to develop indicators for the African continent, for our farmers and for our people, so that we can measure as we move forward, because data is very, very important. Now, we're talking about transition into the agricultural food system. This graph here is 10 years old. It has not changed much. Africa is still the hotspot. There are a few changes here and there. Some countries have moved a little bit, but by and large, this is the situation about food systems in Africa. But on the right-hand side, you can also see the projection of where the growth in human population by the year 2050 will occur. Look at most of it is in Africa. Huge opportunity for us to feed ourselves, but also contribute to feeding the rest of the world. So the question then, at the bottom there I put, is for all of us. What do we need to do in order to change that graph? Especially knowing that majority of the people who grow the crops on the African continent are still the smallholder farmers. So there is something, we must pay attention to that. What is their characteristics? What are their features? What about access to technology, knowledge and information? Are they all educated, or do we need to find a way to capacitate them with knowledge and information? Where is our extension services? So that those technologies and innovation that happen in the universities and the private sector can be transmitted to the smallholder farmers and indeed other farmers as well. So I always believe in a basket approach to farming. It's important to zoom in on smallholder farmers, but I think we must be very, very careful not to focus too much on them, because the village where I come from now, they're almost becoming extinct. Smallholder farmers. None of their children is practicing it. My daughters are not practicing it. I'm probably the last one in my family. So we need to begin to envision a new agriculture that can be propelled by technology and innovation, but maintaining sustainability is the key. Okay, so this graph here just also supports what I've just been saying. Look on the right-hand side, the contribution of agriculture to the GDP as economies develop. It drops. I don't know how you're going to do it for Africa for you to twist that graph for it to go up again so quickly. It's almost like a natural graph. So that means fewer and fewer people will be involved in agriculture. That's why technology and innovation becomes very, very important. We have to think about it. If you look at the left-hand side as well, the contribution of agriculture to our GDP has not changed much. It is so important to us. Why don't we then propel it to the point that the contribution to the growth in GDP can begin to move to 5% and 20%? It's so stagnant over the years. And services are taking over. The young people are going into mobile telephone, ICT, and all the rest. So we need to find a way to begin to change some of these narratives here. Because we are not producing sufficient quantity to our capacity and our resources, because our diets are changing, and people are living more in the cities and eating more and choosing what they want to eat because they have the money, we have to meet the deficit somehow. We import. We bring the food from outside. Currently estimated about $60 billion every year. Now, there's nothing wrong in importation because you have to trade with the rest of the world. Developed countries also import food. The problem in our own is that we are sitting on resources that could have been used to shift our economy and also help us to feed the rest of the world. That is the problem with our own type of food importation. Look at what we are importing. So issues are we are not producing enough. The graph on the left-hand side has not changed. It continues to go up in terms of food importation in Africa. Our own eminent son, President of African Development Bank, look at recent press statement he made. The countries are just rushing to import as a solution to solving the fundamental problems challenging our agriculture. Of course, you can import as a short-term measure, but it cannot be a substitution for better productivity and employment opportunities for your people here. So this old question has come back again. Can Africa feed itself? It's come up again and again and again. People ask 40 years ago, 20 years ago, especially development practitioners who have lived in Africa for many years, as you can see on the left-hand side. Recently, that question is coming up again, published in peer-reviewed international journals. People are really worried, and we are all worried about it. But we have to do something about it. We are doing something about it because a lot of continental initiatives have been started. Grow Africa, Feed Africa, and so on and so forth. And some of the initiatives that FARA is spearheading on the African continent. So, we are running out of time. It's no longer about just who's going to feed us. We are running out of time. Again, our eminent son, with his colleagues here, they are telling everybody we are running out of time for Africa to feed itself. So, time for action. And this is why I want us to pay attention again. Time for change. The first one, more investment in research and development. It is not for the ivory towers. The idea that scientists publish their paper does not mean the research is not relevant. We need to make the connection for the private sector to make use of it, to grow more food, to handle food better. We must stop the blame game. People are still calling for research, more investment, and it is true. Even those countries that we emulate, they are still investing in research and development to move their agricultural food systems forward. Second one, more funding for climate-proof agricultural systems. The climate change is real. We cannot wish it away. So we must pay attention in every food system we're moving to. The last one, more investment by the private sector. I talked about the private sector earlier. We need to begin to think about ways to energize the private sector, to create the incentives, to make it worthwhile. MTN was able to come into Nigeria and make billions of naira almost every month. Why can't more farmers come in and make more money from our food systems? Let's think about this, the opportunity to unleash on the African continent. So these are action points, and that's where I took that from. So the solution moving forward, the general mantra in the literature among development partners, friends, academicians is let's grow more food. Yes, where it is possible to do so sustainably, looking at those elements of sustainable agri-food, we should do that. But in most cases, we are losing more than 50% of what we are producing. And the irony is that most people don't see them. I see them because I'm a researcher in that area. I go to the farms. I see crop left in the field. I see crops affected by diseases. I go to the supermarkets. I go to the back where you don't go. I see cartons, sometimes almost container loads of products discarded. And you don't see them in the supermarket, and they up the price by 0.5%, you pay for it. So post-harvest loss is a big problem. So what we are saying, especially on the African continent, is that we must incorporate the element of saving Africa's harvest as an important aspect of our agricultural food systems transformation. We must make it part of the policy, not just as an afterthought after increasing production. We must save Africa's harvest. Okay, so we're trying to save Africa's harvest, but we're not doing it in a little lab where we're not affected by other things. The issue of climate change, our own scientists, based on African continent, have quantified some of the effects of climate change in decreasing the productivity of African agriculture. So the facts are out there. So it's not that another person did it. These are African scientists. So we know that. There's also evidence by African scientists showing us the shift in the suitability of our current agricultural land for crop production moving into the future, if the current climate crisis continues in the current direction. So we know that. So what will this mean in our future food systems? What does that mean? What type of crops are we going to grow? We don't only eat plants and fruits and vegetables and cereals. For many African communities, they rely on the rivers and lakes for their food systems. Lake Victoria, Lake Chad, and so on and so forth. Look at the change in the population density around those lakes that used to be the source of livelihood of Africans from 1960 to 2005. Look at it, the red. So this is real. This is real. So we have to do something about it. It's not just about fruit and vegetables. So we are doing something about it. We know that African soils are not healthy. We know that African soils are hungry. They need nutrients, just like you and I need nutrients. We know that African soils are also thirsty for them to improve the carrying capacity for crops and livestock. The evidence is there. So recently, we now hear about the fertilizer and soil health program in Africa, which FARA and other partners are spearheading. So AUDA NEPAD also very, very prominent in this area. So the problem has been recognized. It has been quantified. The next now is action. What do we do about it? Look at the quality of African soil. Look at the pH level. Moving more to becoming unproductive for agriculture. All the indicators, amount of carbon in the soil, it's not enough to carry crops that can feed Africa and contribute to the rest of the world. So these are the opportunities for us to get more knowledge to address the problem. Researchers, these issues become of worry to us so that we can provide the evidence to guide policy and possibly investment in those areas. And our good friend Pedro Sanchez, he won the World Food Prize in 2002, mostly work he had done on the African continent. The problem has not gone away. Just last 2015, he wrote this article in Nature Plants, suggesting that Africa was on the route to plentiful food production. I know Pedro. Pedro is very, very enthusiastic, very positive, like myself, about Africa. But most of us know that that sense of optimism is not always backed by things on the ground. And so it was not surprising that as soon as he wrote that article, our African Bank president and a couple of other colleagues came together. Look at the note they wrote to the editor. Said, Pedro Sanchez sketched a very optimistic picture of the future of food production in Africa. And that is right. However, he did not stress the need to care for our soils. So we must care for our soils. This is important to follow this kind of story so we can see opportunity for intervention. That is what we want to talk about during my presentation. We want to find the spaces where we can play a role. And recently also, our colleagues, Thomas Jane and his colleagues, have also looked at what do we now need to do from a research and development perspective. And this is where the role of FARA becomes important in terms of coordination. Look at what they are saying here. Based on a series of analysis, I just want you to pay attention. Look at Africa here at the bottom, sub-Saharan Africa. Look at investment, R&D in agriculture, the smallest compared with the rest of the world, okay? Every indicator, we are the smallest, the lowest. We have to begin to change those kind of statistics. But look, I want us to pay attention. This is where now action comes in. So what do you do as part of NARES, NARO, and so on and so forth? First one here, we need to bring strong NAROs. Our regional or national agricultural research system need to be strengthened. It cannot be overemphasized. Our governments will begin to put money where their mouth is. Of course, we have a lot of donors, we have friends who help us, but we need to begin to drum this harder and harder each time we meet. Our donors are helping, but we need to also begin to think about the way we package these programs so that we can focus on building Africa's capacity to continue to do things by themselves. This is important. And the last one here, this issue of workaround. Most of us know the challenges we face in African institutions. You get money from a donor, you want to do something, the government official, the vice chancellor, somebody tells you you have to do this way and that way. So what most organizations do is that they create a parallel path that will allow them to do something. The danger with that is that capacity is not transferred to build African institutions and people. So we need to find a better way to manage some of these relationships. I'm just going to finish very quickly if this can go. And so, we are here now. FARA is leading. He's trying to explain to us what we must do. FARA is proposing a theory of change. And I encourage all of you to go online and read this. I'll put the website there. To begin to think about how we can work together to begin to shift the needle. The type of toolkits that we need, the approach that we need to follow, the kind of portfolio that we need to build together to enable us begin to address these soil fertility, productivity challenges, and so on and so forth. Very, very interesting. I was very, very happy when I saw this online. So, biodiversity. We know, we hear these stories about young people, old people, anybody coming to Africa with their bags stuffed with plants and animal materials, and we help them to smuggle it out of the continent and just make a few naira here and there. Of course, it's very, very sad. But look at what will happen if we continue that way. That for us to meet the gap in productivity of African agriculture, to enable us to meet our food security needs, it means that we almost have to kill all the underutilized plants and animals because we have to clear more land. We have to farm unsustainably. If we do that, look at the ratio. If we do the business as usual, what will happen to the extinction of biodiversity on the African continent? Africa will be the worst hit. Look at it in the middle. So they're all connected, how we do things here. And so, from an academic point of view as a researcher, this is our proposal I'm going to round up now. So we consider agriculture and food systems in two scenarios, very simplified. We say there's a production side and there's a post-production side. And the production side, we know that we have issues with extensification, clearing more land. It doesn't work anymore. Of course, in some ways, you can sustainably get some new land into production, but that should not be our first choice, because productivity of existing land is very, very low. So we go to intensification. More yield per drop of water, per piece of land, per labor, and so on and so forth. What we are proposing now, that any strategy to improve the productivity of African agriculture must include the post-harvest side, ab initio. It should no longer be an afterthought. If you're going to lose 50% of what you have suffered to produce over here, plus the damaging effect on the environment, doesn't it make sense that you at least try to save what you have produced? So it's very simplified, but it's a guiding principle. If we do it right, then the issue of post-harvest losses, which cost Africa almost $50 billion per annum, can be reduced quite significantly, making more food available for our people and for us to trade with each other. If we manage to put it right and consider all the policies, apply the right technologies and the right investment, our agriculture should look more like this: higher productivity, more products that are highly sought after by people on the right-hand side, but also sustainable in terms of socio-economic impacts on our people, on our profits, and the planet as well. But for me personally, I'm very, very passionate about this idea that we have to have an agriculture and food system that fewer people must be directly involved in farming. We must have such a good system. So because value lies after production, then we can intensify that side, make it more attractive for business people to come in, because there's evidence there's a backward and forward linkages between that. If you just typically go to any farmer now and guarantee them a market price and quantity that they provide to you, next year they'll plant again. In 2010, I had a chance to have a meeting with the present president of AGRA during one of the Roof Forum meetings, and I finished my presentation. Dr. Kalibata, she came to me, she said, "My brother, Linus, what are we going to do? We have invested a lot in inputs for our farmers in Rwanda. They are knocking on the door now, the bumper harvest. No markets, what are we going to do?" I said, "My sister, better go and buy it from them quickly at a good price. Otherwise, you cannot convince them next year to grow." Practical. And that's what the rest of the world does. What does that mean? There's a forward and backward linkage between production and consumption. It is not new, and we know it. So we must take that opportunity so that fewer people will be involved in agriculture. Then we can apply the latest technologies in agricultural production and make it attractive. Typical features we see, if we think about agriculture, we want our food system. This is what most people see. Look at the magazines. Look at the newspapers. They make very easy, nice to put on the front page, right? But is that what you want? It's not what I want. So we have to begin to envision what is possible. And technology, research, and innovation can help us to do that. So this is one scenario about African agriculture. That's not the agriculture that I want. Another scenario is this one, where we begin to apply modern technologies, mechanization, automation, irrigation, fertigation, and so on and so forth. That can increase yield and reduce drudgery. Blisters in our hands. Our mothers and brothers and sisters carrying babies, 3-month-old babies at the back and trying to till the soil. It cannot be in 2025. Technology is available to help us to do that. And then the recent one now, digitize agriculture. Yeah, FARA programs, AUC programs are all talking about it. Why not? Huge opportunity in that area. If you come to my village where I was born in Nigeria, you go to burial of somebody who died at the age of 95 or 100, and he's been buried in a remote farm. You see drones coming to take pictures of somebody who never used a mobile phone all his life, because the children can afford it. They have the technology. And that farm is still not mechanized. Think about it. They bring the drones, they're available in Nigeria, only for burial ceremonies and for weddings to take pictures. What is wrong with our agriculture and food system? Where are the business people to capitalize on this? So this is an example. This is my vision of an African agriculture. Why not? The rest of the world is doing it, and we can do it. We have the human capacity in a way, in terms of contributing in this area. I'm just going to finish up. So, in terms of intervention, entry point, I normally use this graph provided by Gode et al. Just to show where the opportunities might lie. Look at the yield deficit for cereals alone in Africa. 155% were below the world average in our yield. Huge opportunity, just in cereals alone. But where will those opportunities come from? We can go by improving crop yield. You can see the first one here. Huge opportunity there. Yes, we can. Irrigate, improve the soil health, and so on and so forth. You can get huge leap. But look at post-harvest alone. The next one, the one on the right-hand side. Up to 50% jump by just saving the harvest without cultivating at all. If you're a business person, why wouldn't you take that? So this is an opportunity for us to think about. Okay. So, now finally, academic institutions, I have to bring it home. So you have to also take it home. You are in policy, you are in agribusiness, and so on and so forth. What does this mean for you? For me, in academic institutions, I think about research and innovation. I think about learning the best practices to what I do. I think about how I can work with the private sector. I think about capacity in my laboratory, because I can no longer go and do measurements. My job is to bring in money and scout for capacity, talented young men and women, and to go to industry to look for problems to solve. That's what I spend my time doing. Then I have to think about partnership, because I cannot do it alone. I'm an engineer. I'm not a crop scientist. I'm not a plant pathologist, and so on and so forth. So I have to think about partnerships. I also have to think about scaling my work, so to make it relevant, so people can see business opportunity to use it. Those are the things that worry me. I don't know what worries you in your own space. So if these things worry me, what did we do? Just a few years ago, we set up the South African Research Year in Post-Harvest Technology as an intervention to contribute to this space in terms of transforming agri-food systems in South Africa and Africa at large, funded primarily by South African government. But we went back and applied all these things, ideas here, so that for every 1 rand we got from South African government, we got extra 3 rands from the private sector, from donors, from other people who saw an opportunity in what we are doing to add value to their business. Think about it. If we relied on South African government funding alone, we wouldn't have done 1/3 of what we did. In the academic environment, to think about it in your own space as well. So that's what we did. And look at the mantra. I tell my students, when they come into my lab, I tell them, whatever we do, we must link our production to the markets. You're going to publish all those papers. You can go online and read our papers. We publish them, so we contribute to knowledge generation. But we also want to make sure that we don't lose what we produce. Every harvest must count. So when you walk into my lab, these are the things I drum into your ears. But also, we had a vision, very, very bold, 15 years ago. We said we're going to be among the best in the world. The first paper we submitted from South Africa was almost rejected. They said you can publish it in the local magazine for farmers. And I wrote 5 pages to the editor-in-chief. And the paper was accepted within 12 hours. So we must be bold on the African continent. When we make progress, we must own it and show confidence in our policies, in our actions, and don't think that someone else is far, far better than us. But look at what we did. We focused on capacity. Human beings, young men and women is important, but that's not sufficient. The infrastructure to work with, power supply, basic stuff. We call it basic. But what about the institution? Now that I've retired and moved away from that job, the job should be able to continue. If it doesn't continue, then I have failed. There must be some institutional capacity as well. So in whatever you are doing, I want us to think about this. And the second one is very, very important. Sometimes our researchers are admonished that we published and put in the libraries for promotion. I said, I don't know who you're talking about. I asked them, who paid for the research? That's the question. Once you find out who paid for the research, you wouldn't worry about that second one. It's very, very important. So, team science, partnership. We set out deliberately. I can do my own research in my area and publish and work with partners and with industry. But we deliberately set up an interdisciplinary program. Look at the departments that we work with here. In engineering, I've graduated more students in engineering than in some departments in agri-sciences in the same program, because we are solving technological problems along the value chain. Faculty of Science, in health sciences, in economics, these are places where we actually supervise students under the program and graduate them. What does that tell you? It gives you an example of what agricultural value chain looks like. Production is not enough. Somebody must package it. If you don't think about it early, most likely you're going to have high incidence of post-harvest losses because there will be no uptakers. You didn't think about the markets. So this is the same approach we applied in our research work. And so we moved away from projects. The student will have projects to work with. It's okay. But the student must belong to a program. It is the program that becomes what makes the center, the institute, what it is. Not just projects. Students can come and go. So if they ask us what do we do, we say we work on cold chain development. We develop cold chains. Yeah? We reduce post-harvest losses and waste. We develop technologies to manage quality, and so on and so on. Those are programs. And you can put as many masters and PhD students in that area, and you can work with industries as well. So these are examples of problems we solved: quality problem, disorders, diseases, mechanical damage. These are all funded by industry. We didn't just do them for some fun of science. Okay. And then finally, we said, well, let's choose one crop at a time, to walk through the value chain from production up into the market to show what is possible using this philosophy. So pomegranate is a new crop, new in terms of 5 or 10 years, but it's very old. It's in the Bible, it's in the Quran. And 10 years or 15 years ago, South African farmers saw an opportunity, and they started to plant them. Some of them started to remove their apple orchards because they saw opportunity. And the first meeting I had in my office, people came and knocked on the door. That they know, Linus, we saw that you came to Stellenbosch. When we go online to look for information about pomegranate production, your name keeps popping up. Think about this. Scientific credibility. But you must be visible also. People say publication is not good. So they came. The first money we got from the farmers there was for somebody who was bringing planting materials into South Africa, not marketing the fruit, not packaging the fruit. And we're able to convince that company that if you invest in post-harvest, it will be a pool for more farmers wanting to plant, and they buy more planting materials from you. And I gave the first 2 PhD scholarships in my lab. So think about it when you develop your programs here. So I'm just going to follow. So we followed market-led approach. We're not just doing it. We look at the whole value chain all the way to the market. We looked at maturity indices, quality control measures, the latest technology. It's okay. It's available on the African continent. If it's not available, we collaborate with people around the world. It's okay. You don't have to have everything in your space. Packaging was a problem. We redeveloped globally. Traditionally, pomegranate fruit is very big. So I challenged one of my PhD students. We are going to develop a package with 2 layers. The benefit is that we are going to reduce the use of materials, sustainability. We are going to optimize the space in the shipping containers. Now, South Africa has developed the first 2-layer packaging for pomegranate around the world, based on work done in Africa. We're not just talking about anywhere else in the world. And we've used the best science. Value addition, circular economy, bioeconomy. Look at the pomegranate. We put PhD students and masters all the way from the fruit to making oil, to making juice, and making powders that have good value. And they're being used in industry. This is the kind of circular economy we want to do. If we do it right, we have a chance to make an impact. Impact is not just about simple technology that has been applied, but young people being developed their capacity to know what is possible and also to dream big on the African continent. That's what we did. We also participate in international fora. We write books, we write articles, it's okay. And look, in one ceremony, we graduated 4 PhD students, and they're all leaders in the industry now and in academia on the African continent, from South Africa to North Africa and West Africa and East Africa. South African government, when they saw this work initially, for the first 4 years, they commissioned a study, independent, not done by us, to go and look at the socio-economic impact of what we have done. So if you do certain things right, people will be interested. They were able to quantify in monetary terms. The little thing I was doing in the lab, I had no clue about it. I said, give me the millions, then maybe I can retire. So this is what we are talking about, impact. Make your work relevant, and it will attract interest and attention here. Partnership. You can't do it alone. We didn't do it alone, trust me. These are all important partners. From government departments on left-hand side, who provided money, to government parastatals, PPECB, to private sector, fruit growers organizations, to international partners where we send some of our students to learn new techniques. Look at the bottom one here, is PPP, private-public partnership. Look at Post-Harvest Innovation Program. Look at Department of Science and Innovation, Fresh Produce Exporters Forum. We can form those partnerships. It is possible. And these are sources of funding that allowed us to do. Look at Roof Forum. We got a lot of students funded through Roof Forum. They came with their scholarship. All I was not able to do is to fund the research component. It allowed us to double the number of graduate students we could supervise. So there are different combinations that's happening on the African continent that we can learn from as best practices and moving forward. And so what are the lessons, my brothers and sisters here? First of all, in your domain, clear vision of what is possible. You have to decide. Second one, you must have a strategy, a plan. If you don't, you just go by the way. You get tired. You get exhausted. and you drop the ball, possibly. Third one, you must begin to do something, action. You must begin to do something, action, one step at a time. Partnerships and networks. We couldn't have done most of these things here without partnership, trust me. Most of the instrumentation, we couldn't afford it. I sent students to Germany, I sent students to UK, but interestingly, my colleagues in Europe also send students to Africa to come to our lab because they believe we have some capacity in particular areas here. We must grow our own timber, this issue of capacity. We may begin to think about what are those critical skills in your ministry, in your agency, in policy that you need. Put one young man or woman into master's or PhD or any other kind of training. Build their capacity so that when you move, somebody can step up, at least close enough, if not even much better than you did while you were there. Multi-channel basket approach to funding. We could have rested on our laurels that the South African government gave us guaranteed funding for 5 years. We went beyond that to look for sustainability of the funding. In that way, we were able to double and triple our funding. Low-hanging fruits must be harvested. Show quickly your competence, what you can do to your partners. Don't promise for 10 or 20 years and 4 or 5 years you can't even deliver the smallest thing. And that is very, very important. That's from our own experience. Multidisciplinary teams. Begin to think about programs that can characterize who you are and what you do, and not just projects. Every student walks into your lab and they will tell you, I want to go and look at food losses in whatever, in the Sahara Desert. I say, go ahead, it's your problem. You don't have a program. You are supposed to guide the student, mentor them, show them how to develop proposals, and then later on they can replicate it when they leave. And then the last one here, who are your stakeholders? In everything you do, there must be critical stakeholders. Engage them as early as possible if you can. So after 15 years, we are now trying to move across the continent to see if we can begin to replicate the little success of what we have done. So we have started this UNESCO International Center in Nigeria, located inside the University of Nigeria and Nsukka, and these are the thematic areas. We focus on food security, tropical diseases. But on each side, you can still see those maps about Africa. Look at bioresources. Look at biodiversity extinction map, or the concentration in Africa, huge opportunities for us to work on in those areas. And then on that note, colleagues, I want to thank you for listening to me. My challenge to all of us now is, let's take some action in our own little space. Thank you very much.